Good morning. Welcome to the 15th annual membership meeting of Affordable Housing Professionals of New Jersey. And taking a look at my screen, it looks like we have 48 attendees this morning, and that's great. And we appreciate you joining with us. We are disappointed because we're not together. As my letter welcoming you indicates, this time last year, we fully expected to be munching on donuts and bagels at some convenient location and renewing acquaintances with all of you who are members of our group. And of course, that didn't happen this year. However, during this crazy COVID time, you have stuck with us. You'll hear from our report on membership is up, and we've remained active during the COVID year. The board has fielded a lot of questions from you and from others in the area of affordable housing, and we hope that our responses have been of some assistance. So with that welcoming, I would like to then turn the program over to my colleague, Gail Pfister. Gail is going to deliver the report on the current status of our memberships. Gail?
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of our membership chair, Marilyn Tickton, who could not be here with us today, I am pleased to provide you with information on the current status of our membership. So currently we have 180 members and probably a little bit more than that. And our members represent a real diverse collection of professionals working within the nonprofit, for-profit, the public sector, and including architects, planners, municipal housing liaisons, administrative agents, and many more. As Ed stated, we field many questions from not only our members, but from out there in the public sector. I'm also pleased to report that we have 15 phenomenal sponsors representing the different levels of sponsorship. We have 1 platinum level, 5 gold levels, and we have 9 silver levels. And please look in your annual report. There is a sponsor page, and we couldn't be more pleased for those companies that have and agencies that have stood up and decided to sponsor this organization. They are phenomenal, and we love to have them, and there's always room for more sponsors as well as more membership. So keep in tune. If you have any questions on membership, either reach out to Lindsay Britt, our administrator, or Marilyn Tickton, our membership chair. And on that note, I would like to present our finance chair, Randy Gottesman.
Thanks.
Randy, you're muted.
How's that?
Now you're live.
Okay. 4th time was a charm. Okay. So hi, everybody. AHPNJ strives to maintain a sustainable budget that reflects the organization's mission. This includes expanding our role in the affordable housing industry and seizing new opportunities to support our members while keeping member and event fees as low as possible to attract participation in the organization. In fact, to support our mission in 2022, we hope to be unveiling new assistance to students interested in affordable housing to help them understand and further explore this industry. Membership and sponsorship rates remained steady in 2021, while event fees were only a small source of income this year. As the pandemic limited the number of events offered, that also reduced the number of expense, the dollar amount in our expense line item as well. We are certainly hopeful, as Ed said, that 2022 will present more face-to-face programming and networking opportunities. The Finance Committee looks forward to 2022 to continuing our years-long trend of maintaining a fully sustainable budget. A 2022 budget is currently being worked on and will soon be reviewed and hopefully ultimately approved by the full board, likely this December, to cover the year ahead. Thank you to all the affordable housing professionals and participating organizations for continuing to support AHPNJ. As Gail said, without you, AHPNJ could not afford to properly serve its members. I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Mark to provide his education report. It's all yours, Mark. Watch out for the mute button.
Thanks, Randy. I almost started moving my mouth to fake a mute, but good morning, everyone. I'm pleased. My name is Mark Leckington, the Vice President of AHPNJ and the Chair of the Education Committee. The Education Committee is tasked with identifying new and emerging needs of educational opportunity for the membership. We're tasked with looking for gaps in existing programming and working with the program committee and the Rutgers Education Committee to help develop and respond. We're also going to be taking a look at reviewing the existing coursework to make recommendations for updates and improvements to those classes. The education committees met once this year, early, I think it was in April. We're hopeful that there's going to be another meeting before the end of the year, and with that, starting a quarterly meeting process for 2022. And if anybody is interested in learning more about the education committee, feel free to reach out, and be happy to connect you. Next up, I'm going to introduce Frank Piazza to talk about his report. Policy report.
Hello, everybody. This is Frank Piazza, and I chair the policy committee, not the program committee, but the policy committee with Megan York from CGP&H. If you could just switch the slide to the proper one, I'd probably be less distracting, and I'd appreciate it.
We don't have a slide for the policy committee.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you anyway. Recommending changes to the uniform housing affordability controls and identifying the committee can support and improve upon in regards to the administration of affordable housing. They continue to be our main goals. So we are still working diligently at that. The committee met in March to discuss specific programs and legislation that it could affect. We will continue to seek dialogue with New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency to discuss things such as UHAC updates, affirmative marketing regulations, and now a universal application process and other pertinent matters. So we're still really in the process of trying to get a good dialogue going so that we can review what's being done and maybe get a little ahead of the game. Our most recent meeting featured something a little different regarding a new DCA regulation that governs condominiums and homeowners associations, specifically with respect to the representation on their boards for affordable owners. So that there is a new law from 2017, actually, but new regulations from just last year that really are requiring HOAs and condominium associations to provide for separate representation for affordable units. So that's something that we spoke at length about at our last meeting. So we met twice this year. We're setting up quarterly meetings for 2022 in advance, and Megan's kind of taken the horns and already got that process going for next year. And that is my report with or without the slide. And I'd like now to turn this over to Gail for the program report with a slide.
Good morning, everyone, again. as we've all said, we've all had constraints dealing with lots of different things during this pandemic, and what we can get accomplished and what we can't get accomplished, and the learning curve for all our technological things that we can and cannot do. So we've been striving to still provide programming, even though we haven't been able to meet in person. And I have to give kudos to Frank and Megan for policy and Mark for education, because I, not only myself as program chair, but our whole program committee really works in tandem with those two other committees to see what's hot issues so that we can provide programming for the membership. So we only had one other programming, which was in April. We will have another program on November 4th, which is Crisis Within a Crisis Revisited, where we are going to be looking at the issue of tenants and not being able to pay their rent. So we're looking at programs that can help tenants and landlords. So if you haven't registered for that, we have a phenomenal panel group that will be leading that up on November 4th. Going forward into 2022, I can tell you that the program committee is working on 4 to 5 programs that we will be rolling out after November. So most likely January, February, March, etc. So just keep looking. We'll get the information out as soon as we can so that you can mark your calendars accordingly. If you have any pertinent needs that you would like us to consider for a program, please do not hesitate to reach out to us so that the program committee can begin looking into providing a program along that line. Right now, we do not have plans to meet for a holiday celebration, which makes us sad. But things keep changing, and we're just not sure that that could happen this year. We're hoping that things will ease up a bit, that we will be able to meet in person for our programs in 2022, at least perhaps maybe by late spring, where we would do our symposium. We're sort of not in charge of how we're doing this, guys. So the pandemic has sort of taken over our lives and all the rules and regulations of what we can and cannot do. We are here to serve you, and we hope that you will hang in there with us, and we look forward to providing programming in 2022 as we move forward. And on that note, I'm going to turn this over to Mark Lexington, our Vice President, who is going to continue the program.
Thanks, Gail. The next part of our program is to recognize all of the students that achieved their AHPNJ Affordable Housing Professional Certification through the coursework at Rutgers. As Gail mentioned, this has been a challenging time to present programming and classes. I think it's an equal challenge on the other side of the Zoom call in participating in these things. It seems that everybody's the demands are very high on everyone as far as scheduling goes, and of course there's so many distractions that are available to pull your attention away from a class that wouldn't normally be there in the real life. So kudos to everybody that's either taken a class during this time or gone through the entire coursework, in fact. So congratulations to all those folks. We are going to turn it over to Christine, CCO from Rutgers, to recognize those individuals that graduated this year.
Nope, sorry. That's not next. No, you're going to hand it over to Frank now, who's going to honor Christine. And then it's Laura.
My pleasure. I'm sorry about that. My schedule, so Frank, take it away.
So, put me on the spot. We would just like to take, I can't see her and I hope she's on this call. And that is Christine CCO. We would like to take a minute to acknowledge Christine, who recently moved on, so sadly for us, moved on from Rutgers to become the Director of Continuing Education at Penn State, Abington. We are really grateful to have the support and guidance of Christine for nearly 6 years as we developed our professional certification program with Rutgers. Christine, we appreciate your devotion to AHPNJ and the many years you spend growing our certification courses, materials, instructors, and programs. Great achievements are the result of the cooperation of the many minds with a common vision working toward common goals. We wouldn't have met so many goals without you. Thank you for your exceptional work and paramount dedication throughout the years. As we move on to the next amazing chapter of your life, as you move on to the next amazing chapter of your life, know that you will be missed. Know that our very best wishes and thoughts go with you. And know that we will never forget your professional expertise, dedication to AHPNJ Rutgers courses, and most of all, your friendship. We thank you very much. And I'm told that you can use the reactions button on Zoom to show your appreciation for Christine.
And Christine is on the call, so if you wanted to turn on your video, Christine, and say anything, or if you want to be shy, either way is fine.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Christine.
Thank you so much, Frank, for the kind words. You know, I was very honored when Frank reached out to me to invite me today. It was an absolute pleasure and an absolute honor working with this program, with AHPNJ, with the Instructors Education Committee, and of course, all the students during my time at Rutgers. You all do very important work, and I'm always so inspired by what you do and your dedication to the communities that you serve. I miss everybody. I will continue to miss everybody, but I do wish everybody the best professionally and personally. And again, thank you for this acknowledgement today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think I'm turning it back over to Mark. Cool.
Yes, thanks, Frank. And for anybody that may not have interacted with Christine, that is really just a testament to how well the programming runs at Rutgers. Christine spends a lot of time over the years troubleshooting issues, most recently with technology, but with signing up for classes and things like that. So the good news is that we have been put in the very capable hands of Laura Flagg, and I'd like to introduce her. Laura?
Morning, everybody. I'm Laura. It's nice to see most of you. I do have some very big shoes to fill with Christine, but I miss her tremendously and wish her the best. I'm going to share my screen. All right, perfect. That awkward moment where somebody has to do that. Okay, so let's get my portion started here today. Good morning, graduates. Good morning, AHPNJ members. It was just about a month ago, I took over coordination of the program with you all. I've been with Rutgers for over 10 years already, coordinating some other programs for municipal government. So I'm not quite new to this job, but I'm new to affordable housing. So some of you may actually know me from the planning and zoning program, which I coordinate at the center. So first, I'd like to thank Christine for her guidance in getting me here over the past month or so during the transition. I'd also like to thank the association for having me today. I look forward to working with all of you in the coming undetermined amount of time, but I'm here to be with you for however long it takes, and I'm happy to do so. So within my other programs that I manage in the center, I was thinking about it. And one of the things that I love are graduations and recognition events, because it's always such a great opportunity to take a minute and really think about what you've accomplished and what you've done. I do have some other programs that have graduations, and it's just a great time to just stop and think and be proud of yourselves. So I hope that the graduates that are with us today are able just to take a minute and give yourselves a pat on the back, because it's not often that we get to do so in life. As Mark had said, you know, life is continuously throwing these competing priorities and challenges our way, the pandemic, transitioning to online learning. And yet our graduates have persevered despite what was ever going on and whatever issues that you had to address. So well done. And also, it's just great to be together. I know that everybody wants to be in person, but this is a really nice opportunity the association has given us to celebrate today. So I'm going to advance. So today we're here to celebrate over 40 graduates that have successfully completed all the requirements in the program to be an affordable housing professional. You're diving right in. You're here today together with us, obtaining continuing education, networking, and being a part of the association. So take a look. Over 40 people have stuck with it during this tumultuous time. So job well done to all of you. Virtual round of applause to all of you. Thank you. Also, I absolutely need to recognize the people that keep us going. Frank, Rick, Mark, Eileen, and Kathy. You guys are the rock of the program, the foundation, and we really have created a wonderful partnership with all of our instructors and all of our education committee members. So I want to thank all of you for everything that you have done during the transition, throughout the courses, the hiccups, the successes. We really, really appreciate everything that you do. I'd also like to thank the CGS staff, particularly Christine and Priscilla, who I'm sure many of you know through emails and registration and things like that. I wouldn't be anywhere without any of these people here on the screen, so thank you to them. So with that, I just want to wish our graduates great success. I know that you're to wonderful, wonderful things. CGS is still here for you. You still need to maintain your continuing education. So we're not going to get rid of anybody that easily once you obtain your certificate. So we're here if you need us, and keep on pursuing your education to improve your communities, because that's kind of why we're all in this business. So congratulations and best wishes. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Laura. And it's really remarkable that you have a graduating class of 40 people. I mean, when this began, we had 4 people. So it's really remarkable how the program has taken off. And we certainly look forward to working with you as we did previously and with Christine. So thank you very much, and good luck in your new position. Let me see, on my cheat sheet here, it says I'm supposed to announce the results of our Board of Election. We circulated a ballot, and we invited all the members to vote for the individuals who would willing to continue basically on our board. And I'm pleased to report mostly virtual ballots came in, a couple of written ballots, and there was a unanimous vote for the following members to continue for another 2-year term on the board: Michael Cediani, Josh Bauers, Sharon Clark, Toy Collins, Randy Gottesman, Samantha Hennessy, Mark Leckington, Gail Pfeiffer, Pfister, and me, Ed Schmier. So I'm pleased to report that everyone was reelected to the board, and we'll look forward to another 2 years of working with AHPNJ. I think next we have our main event with Josh Bauer. I see Josh on the screen. He even put on a tie for this today, so you should all be. As an attorney with the Fair Share Housing Center. He's not just an attorney, he's a good attorney. And he and the Fair Share Housing Center have been, I guess, monitoring and watching over the implementation of the approved programs for the third round of the COA obligation, which is hard to believe, but as we turn into 2022, we're going to start this all over again in 2025. But Josh and his colleagues at the Fair Share Center have their finger on the pulse, and we thought it would be helpful for all of our attendees. And I see we have 71 now attending, and that's great. For Josh to perhaps get us up to speed and give us a couple of tips on the issues that they're interested in, they're watching, and they're encouraging. So with that, Josh, if you can unmute yourself and give us an update, I'd appreciate it.
Will do. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen. I actually prepared a short PowerPoint presentation, doing my best rendition of being a real presenter here. So let's see if I can actually manage to do this. How's that? Can everybody see that? Okay. So I was asked to sort of, well, let me back up. So I'm Josh Bauers, as Ed said. I'm staff attorney with Fair Share Housing Center. We are the entity that was, designated by the Supreme Court in 2015 to really to participate in all of the Mount Laurel affordable housing cases that were about to be filed at that time. And so we've been very busy over the last 6 years and remain very busy. I kind of just wanted to give an update on where things stand, and really starting with the title slide here with what the heck just happened. So we had a very busy 6 years. I think nobody really knew what to expect when the Supreme Court. So in 2015, as we all know, the Supreme Court finally, at the after about 15 years of delay, the Supreme Court finally said, we're not going to wait for COA to finally adopt valid regulations anymore, and we are going to turn this all over to the courts. And so, as we all know, I think several hundred municipalities ended up filing what are called declaratory judgments, basically asking the court to say that they have met their Mount Laurel obligations. We participated in all of those cases, and in many of them as formal interveners, and many of them as just interested parties. And our goal really over the last 6 years has been trying to make sure that all of these cases result in municipalities that are actually complying with the law and complying with the fair share obligations. As I'm sure folks could have predicted in 2015, really the biggest issue at that time, really before you can figure out how a town is going to address its fair share, is actually figuring out what its fair share actually is. And so that ultimately became a big point of contention in 2015, 2016, and honestly, even into 2017. There were, I think, 2 full-length trials just on the methodology on how you actually calculate the fair share obligations. One was the decision from Judge Wolfson, another was the decision from Judge Jacobson. This stuff is really complicated, as I'm sure everybody is aware, and I'm sure everybody has probably heard, if not by now, that Judge Jacobson's trial ended up being bifurcated, where she ultimately held 40 days of testimony just on the methodology of how you calculate the fair share obligations. And I sort of said all that to say and to sort of show kind of the continuing need for affordable housing in New Jersey. I think over the years, ultimately, we sort of ended up with a methodology that was calculated by Judge Jacobson that I think everybody could sort of live with, which calculated a statewide affordable housing need for the gap and the prospective need of about 159,000 affordable homes. I think as we've sort of gone on, we've, so much time has elapsed now that we've actually now had the 2020 census, which has given us a lot more new information. And that new information, I think, has really shown that many of the numbers that the experts were relying on at that time were conservative. And that even goes for Dr. Kinsey. I think we've sort of seen that the population projections, the household projections, and ultimately the headship rate at that time proved to be conservative. And so the affordable housing need remains tremendous, notwithstanding everything else that's happened over the last 6 years. I think we've tried our best to come up with an agreeable methodology, and I think we've done that to try to really move the ball forward with new affordable homes. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we've made a lot of progress, but there remains a significant need for affordable housing. So our goal really over the last 6 years has been trying to settle the municipal affordable housing obligations and the fair share plans that the towns would implement. At this point, we've actually, and for some time now, we've basically completed settlements with nearly all of the towns. I think in every sample size or every sample size, there's always going to be, I think 345 towns at the end of the day filed declaratory judgments, and we have, I guess it'd be 343. So we have settlements with 340 towns. I think there's 3 that filed declaratory judgments in 2015 where we don't yet have agreements. And then there's a handful of others that filed their declaratory judgments after that. But for all intents and purposes, I think we've largely gotten through the settlement phase, and now it's really just about implementing the settlements, monitoring the settlements, and making sure that the towns are actually following through. I added a slide in here. Oh, here we go. So we have 340 settlements. About 275 of those towns, sort of give or take, now have what are called final judgments of repose or conditional judgments of repose. And that's sort of the judicial equivalent of substantive certification that COA would have given. And so there's another 60 or 70 where we have agreements where the towns are still, there's still certain things they have to do to finish things up. But I think the big point is that there are agreements in place and the towns have agreed to take certain steps, in furtherance of the affordable housing. So this is sort of a breakdown of where those settlements are. We have 340. They really, I'll say that we have settlement agreements with every town, not every town, with many towns really all over the state. I think there's 564 municipalities at this point, and we have settlement agreements with 340 of them. They run the gamut of, going all the way from Cape May Point, which is the furthest south municipality, all the way to Montague up in Sussex County, which is, I think, the northernmost municipality. And in every county we have settlement agreements. I think this process has been somewhat malleable enough that 18 towns in Warren County where there's not very much sewer or other infrastructure to build very much, that 18 towns in that county were able to get through. But we were also able to really focus in on many of the other counties like Bergen and Morris and Middlesex and Mercer and some of these other places where there is lots of infrastructure and lots of land in some of the Central Jersey towns. So we really have settlements all over the place, and I think we also have a map here. I think I put that in here. So here's our big sea of green map with all the settlements. The orange are the three from 2015 that are not settled. I'm realizing now that there's 4 orange on there. The one in the middle is South Brunswick, where they just aren't going to settle. They have final judgment on a plan, but the other three are unsettled and may ultimately settle. And then the blue are these other sort of cases that were filed after 2015, and we are working hard with those towns to try to come up with a resolution. So it really does, as I said, run the gamut of, really all over the state, lots of settlements, lots of towns really sort of getting through the process. Here's something just sort of amusing or at least it was amusing to me, that I thought I would share. We have 340 settlement agreements. We have settlement agreements with 5 different towns named Washington Township. Another 4 towns named Franklin Township. We have settlement agreements with 12 different towns that have Park in the name, and 20 different towns with Wood in the name. Whoever is naming the towns in New Jersey, I think, does not get a gold star for creativity. I would say we have a lot of towns with repeat names, and it just was sort of amusing to me. So hopefully to others as well. I did ask before preparing the presentation, I did ask a few folks if they had ideas for things that they would like me to cover. I'm definitely going to be available. I want to answer some questions afterward, but I also did want to try to hit on things initially. And so one person asked about the midpoint review. So as we all know, so 2020 was the midpoint review. That's the midpoint between 2015 and 2025. And, it's sort of been I think there wasn't as much activity around the midpoint review in 2020 and 2021 as we might have anticipated. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. COVID is certainly a big part of it. I think the fact that many of the towns really didn't finalize their settlements and their repos until 2018, 2019, I think it would be hard for, let's just use Fair Share as an example. I think it would be hard for Fair Share to go into court on a case that just got final judgment in 2019 and to go in 2020 and start yelling about, that they haven't, that certain things haven't moved forward. I think the judges would not be very happy about that. So I think, but I also think that part of the reason there hasn't been as much activity is a good one. It is because in these plans, there were lots of developments where there were direct developers attached to many of the sites. I think it sort of was a little bit different than, I think this process sort of went a little bit different than it might have gone before COA, where the town may have prepared plans and, put sites in the plan, sort of without regard to whether there was a developer that was interested in building it. And then, the developer would have it, developers would have a chance to go get the site under control and try to figure out whether they could make it work. In this process, it was sort of a little bit different, where on many of the sites, there were developers who were at the table negotiating for terms that, they knew they could actually develop the site. And I would also say that we sort of didn't wait for the midpoint review to correct problems. So if there was a town that settled in 2016 or 17, and in 2018 or 19, one of these sites ends up at the planning board, is getting delayed or gets denied at the board, we're addressing that then, in 2018 or 19. We're not waiting for the 2020 midpoint review. So all that being said, there have been probably maybe 24 towns that have had various activities during the midpoint review. A couple where the plans have already been amended with new sites, a few more that we're still working on it, and a few more that are maybe a little further away. So there has been a lot of that, not as much activity as we would have thought around the midpoint review, but I think both for some reasons that we expected and maybe a few that we didn't. Let me keep going. So while I was at it, I also just want to cover a few things that really directly relate to the folks that are actually administering many of these affordable housing units. So when we entered this process, a lot of the towns, nearly all of them, were still using the 2014 income guidelines. And what we have been trying to do over the years, we've included in nearly all of our settlement agreements a requirement for the town to update the income limits. As I'm sure everybody is aware, AHPNJ has a big hand in that, in updating and circulating the updated charts as we get the information from HUD. So every town, I'm gonna paint with a broad brush. I said nearly all. I'm gonna say all of the towns should be using the 2021 income limits and the 2022 when they come out. If you are in a town and if you're in a town that is not using the 2021 or the updated income limits, please let us know. We have ways of dealing with that. Either, if we have an agreement with the town, I'm sure that it already has a requirement for them to update the income limits. If we don't have an agreement with the town, we've been able to figure out ways to give folks the legal cover to use the updated guidelines with consent orders or maybe some other kind of agreement. So we've done that in a number of places, but as far as we're concerned, everybody should be using the updated income guidelines. Two other pieces that I wanted to cover are changes in law that have happened over the last year and a half. One being the Fair Chance in Housing Act, which relates to tenancy and leasing and leasing to folks who have criminal records, and the Housing Resource Center bill, which is a little bit older, and I'm sure everybody's sort of heard about that by now. So I'm just going to go through to them, maybe the Fair Chance in Housing Act a little bit more deeply. So this is the, you may have heard it otherwise referred to as ban the box or ban the box for housing. That just refers to the, a lot of times on the housing applications, there'll literally be a box that you check if you have a criminal background. And what the legislature, what I think was attempting to do, is to try to get that out of the process, because you really don't learn very much information from somebody just checking one box. You really don't. And what ends up happening is somebody checks the box and their application goes in the trash. And that's just not a fair way to provide access to housing. So I'll just sort of go through there are limitations on the application. So on the initial application, you're really not allowed to ask about criminal background at all. There are a couple exceptions which are on here, which is whether the person is on a sex offender registry or has convictions for methamphetamine production. Other than that, you're really not allowed to ask on the application whether a person has a criminal background. Along with that, one of the other problems that I think the legislature was trying to eradicate was this problem of landlords or whoever announcing applications, accepting application fees, and then just completely rejecting the person out of hand just because they have a criminal background. When if the person would have known that they would not have been considered because of their criminal background, they probably wouldn't have applied in the first place, and it's just really unfair. So in order to, before you accept the application fee, you have to disclose whether you're going to consider the criminal history in any conditional offer. And you have to explain the process. If you are going to consider criminal history or criminal record in extending a conditional offer, you have to provide information about what process would be in place. And so that's what leads me to the next piece here, which is when you're considering a criminal record in the application process, I think this should be a no-brainer, I think, but maybe it's not. But a criminal record obviously doesn't include somebody who hasn't actually been convicted of any crimes. That's sort of antithetical to kind of the principle of, innocent until proven guilty. So you really aren't allowed to consider just simple arrests without any conviction, expunge convictions, pardon convictions, and the like. So when you are considering it, you have to, and I can circulate the PowerPoint presentation too, so folks can see this, and I'm going to circulate some more information. I don't want to read the entire presentation, everybody, but you can consider an applicant's criminal history in certain instances after a conditional offer. So it can't be on the application, but you can consider certain things afterward. And those are the things that are listed here. And there are, I'll just point you to the second, third, and fourth ones, which are for first, second, third, and fourth degree offenses. There are time limitations on this. And so if you're talking about somebody who was convicted of a third degree offense 20 years ago, you really shouldn't be considering that in whether whether to extend an offer, a conditional offer. And that was one of the things, I think, during the testimony for this legislation. There were several, I think, really compelling bits of testimony from folks who were convicted of pretty low-level offenses 20 years ago and still can't seem to find housing because of it. And there's just really no room for that in a fair society. So there's a process in place for if the person has a criminal background for any of the above and kind of what you need to do. You can withdraw the conditional offer based on the criminal history, but you have to do it for a bona fide reason. It has to be a substantial, legitimate, and non-discriminatory interest. And you have to show that. You can't just say, I'm not going to accept, because of this particular thing. You actually, there has to be a nexus between that and why you're not accepting the applicant. And really, and as the last point says, there should be an individualized assessment. It really shouldn't be painting with a broad brush. I'm trying to think if there is. So before I go on to Housing Resource Center, so for the Fair Chance in Housing Act, I think it seems pretty clear to me that this in the act, it sort of talks about housing providers and landlords. I think this squarely also encompasses folks who are administering the affordable housing, the administrative agents and the like. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to share it, because when you go deeper into the act, it is very clear that there are penalties that could potentially be levied upon folks who don't comply. One last point on this act is, so it just went into effect earlier this year. I believe it is the DCA, or maybe the Division on Civil, I think it's the Division on Civil Rights, DCR, is currently doing rulemaking on this, to sort of formalize this into regulations. The regulations have been published and they are accepting comments until November 6th. So I'm sure folks that are on this call probably have some thoughts and ideas about this. So I would encourage everybody to sort of take a look at it, and if you have any thoughts or questions or comments, to send them in to the DCR. And if anybody has any questions, we can probably circulate how to do that. The second one is the Housing Resource Center. I'll lightly touch on this one. This one I think is much more simple. I think the idea is that all of the affordable housing units are supposed to be marketed on the Housing Resource Center, the website, and the phone system. And there are sort of particular requirements for how this is done. It needs to be done at least 60 days prior to conducting any lottery, or within 1 day of doing any other affirmative marketing. There are some particular requirements for what needs to be in the listing, the date the units will be available, the date of the lottery, the number of homes available, and sort of more particularly, what income mix and which bedroom mix will be available. The act, I think, largely sort of puts this on the administrative agents and the municipal housing liaisons. So that's another reason I wanted to sort of mention it today. It's really, I think, incumbent upon folks on this call to make sure that for your clients that these that the homes end up on the website. A few other things that we're looking out for: deed restrictions, and I don't have a slide for this, but deed restrictions. Excuse me, I'm trying to. Anyway, deed restrictions, what we're looking for are when you're executing new deed restrictions to have sort of a listing on the deed restriction of the location of each of the affordable homes, including the low mod split and the bedrooms. I think as we've gone along in this process, I've reviewed probably more deed restrictions than I ever thought I would ever have reviewed in my life, and I think they're one of the things that is much more helpful to have on there, and especially for the municipalities when they go to try to get credit for the affordable homes, is to actually have these specific locations and the bedroom and income mix on the deed restriction, which is not universal. I think we've seen it in a lot of places. We've also not seen it. And I think that's it. I realize that this is going a little bit long, so I kind of want to stop and let folks ask questions if anybody has any, and we can sort of go from there.
Yeah, we've had a couple of questions in the chat. And first of all, thank you, Josh. That's super helpful. There's a lot of really good information in there. It was packed with great data. We did get there's been a couple of questions about the Fair Chance Housing Act. Maureen Fullaway asked how an administrative agent is supposed to know about the degree of a criminal act. And I'm certain that the board members on the call are already scratching notes about trying to develop a program around this Fair Chance Housing Act. But wondering, Josh, if you have any suggestion for Maureen.
I mean, I think I assume it would come back in whatever the criminal background check produces. So if you're going to conduct a criminal background check, I assume, I've never done one myself, so I don't think I've ever seen one, but I assume that it would say, I assume that it's not sort of a binary, yes, there's a background, or no, there's not. I assume that there's some particulars in there about maybe what the convictions were for and when they were, when the convictions were. But that's a good question. And I will. Well, the other thing, I think I mentioned this before. I wanted to circulate some more information on this. I just didn't get it together before the meeting today. So I'll make sure that I send that either to Lindsay or somebody else to circulate to everybody.
That'll be super helpful. Thanks. I think there's also like another sort of layer to this too, right? Where there's a bunch of us on the call are responsible for applying this new act and this new law to the units that we administer. But I have a feeling that there's a lot of people that are, especially if you're at the municipal level, that are thinking, hey, I need to be pushing this out to my landlords, especially those smaller landlords that aren't really, staying in tune with changes in rules and regulations. So that I'm hopeful that there's going to be some webinars and sort of large scale training on this that we can be then passing along, whether either in written form or some sort of video or something like that. So yeah, this is incredible.
I would think so. I would think the DCR is going to be doing some of that. I know there were a few things that happened after the Housing Resource Center bill with, I think the HMFA did a couple webinars, but I think my expectation is that the state would do something, and if not, then maybe we can get a program together with AHPNJ or something like that.
Yeah, it seems like might be a good partnership too with legal services, and they generally run a lot of educational programs along these lines as well. Renee Cannell had a question. It was a question. Will there be more room for mistakes/suits when looking at applications individually versus a steadfast set of rules that abide by a current law? You have any thoughts on that, Josh?
You mean in doing the individualized assessment on each of the? I think the idea there is that if you're going to deny somebody housing, that it really needs to be for a very good reason. And I think that's when we have these blanket provisions, I think we often realize that these blanket provisions can be applied in a way that really manifests itself in really unfair ways, especially when you think about, and I think one of the big impetuses of the act, what is a recognition of the fact that in New Jersey, especially, people of color are more likely to be convicted of a crime and to spend time in jail. And I think when that results in sort of post-release denial of housing, I think it just sort of exacerbates this already, really chronic problem. And that's why I really think we do need to have, and it makes sense to have an individualized assessment rather than these sort of blanket provisions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This would be a great time to plug the book, The Color of Law, if anybody's interested in this topic. That is a fantastic read. We also had a question about the midpoint reviews. I know it's always, I've been wondering, I've been fascinated with, this, where, the reports as they've come in, or have there been things that have concerned you in these reports? I know the data set's very small, but have you seen things in the reports that have concerned you, or things that have made you optimistic, or do you have any like sort of overview feedback to share on the reports you've seen so far?
Well, I think this all sort of ties all together with COVID and all the stuff that was going on. Right before the midpoint review, we actually did send out sort of form spreadsheets and that sort of thing on kind of how we wanted the information to be sent in, so it will be kind of easier to analyze. Not everybody did that, and I think we've gotten varying degrees of specificity information, including one particular law firm that represents a bunch of towns that will remain nameless for now, who tried to really limit the amount of time that folks could review this information and actually act on it, which is certainly, really unfair, especially considering the fact that we were all living in and continue to live in a global pandemic. So on the process piece, I think that's sort of where we are. Is we're still sort of we really still are gathering information. We've gone back to a number of towns and asked them for more information on certain things. On the specifics on like what the towns have been doing, I think it's sort of a mixed bag. I think, I'll sort of, what I said earlier, I think still rings true. A lot of the developments that had developers attached to them really did move forward either one way or the other. Either they got through the planning board or they didn't, and there ended up being more litigation. So there was, one sort of example I'm dealing with right now is a town got reposed in 2018. Site goes to the planning board and they put them through 10 hearings or something over a year, and they deny them at the end of the process. And so we're litigating that right now. It's sort of independent of the midpoint review, but that's happening. I just had another point that I was thinking of while I was answering that question, and I lost it already. I think, so, a lot of what we're realizing is the midpoint review also has presented some, some of our early agreements. So, 2000, I don't think we really had too many agreements in 2015. I think the process was really still getting started. It really wasn't until later 2016 that we really started to get some settlement agreements. And I think what we're realizing is, those are the places where if something is from 2016 and it really still hasn't moved forward, that's where we're going to have the ability to actually have an impact. And that's kind of happened in, one famous example is in Chatham Borough. They had, I think what we thought it was a reasonable plan in 2016. And, I think there were just some changes in circumstances that happened over the years. And what ended up happening is there was a developer that came to the table, Fair Share was at the table, and the plan is being amended where they're going to produce, I think right now they're going to produce, 50 more new affordable units than they would have in the agreement in 2016. So, not sure if that answered the question, but I was sort of rambling, but
no, that's all interesting. I look forward to more information as the sort of the data set becomes larger with these midpoint reviews. So that's a great little sneak peek. Speaking of sneak peeks, Leslie London is asking you to pull out the crystal ball and ask if you've got any insights about the next round in 2025.
Leslie, good to hear from you. I don't know. I think it's, I've heard lots of prognosticating. Is that a word? Prognosticating? From a lot of different people, that COA is coming back or some replacement for COA is coming back, or, the fourth round will be really easy because, we won't have to deal with the gap period issue, which probably is to some degree probably right. One of the things that made the third round, this process particularly challenging is, we were dealing with a 26-year period of need rather than a 10-year period of need, or even what was shorter in the prior round, which were 6-year periods of need. So I think when towns have sort of seen the numbers for a 26-year period of need, it just sort of made eyes sort of jump. So I do think that's probably true when we get to the fourth round in a few years. It may be a little more simple because there'll just be the 10-year period of need. I think there's also, some of the other prognosticators have said that, well, now we have Judge Jacobson's decision, and what we're going to do is we're just going to plug in, new information into that methodology and come up with the numbers, and that'll at least sort of figure out at least one piece of it, sort of the more extensive piece of it, which is trying to figure out what the numbers are. That could be true. I don't know for sure, but if you're asking me whether we're going to be before the courts again or before COA, I have no idea. I have no clue. I don't think we've seen any real indication from the current administration as to kind of what they're looking to do for the fourth round. And, obviously we're having an election in another week, and, depending on how that goes, it's going to, have obvious impacts on what happens with affordable housing when one candidate is, at least, sort of supporting affordable housing, and another one is decrying Mount Laurel as an abomination and, the worst thing that ever happened in New Jersey. So it's hard to know until we get there.
Toy Collins had a comment about the background checks, and she stated that the background checks that she's seeing do show the convictions and the time. So there should be enough detail in those background checks to make an informed decision and consistent, fair decision. But following up on that, Josh, do you see this? The implementation of this act rolling out as with best practices that would require like a set of policies on this? Like sort of amending tenant selection policies with information specific to this act.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, I'm talking about landlords are required to have these tenant selection policies that set in writing, set a credit score and and thresholds for which they're rejected and approved. Do you see the act actually making its way into those written policies and procedures?
I think so, and I think I think we're gonna learn more once we finish this rulemaking piece. You know, it's one thing to get, you know, and that's kind of why we have the rulemaking. I think is, you know, it's one thing to have legislators who are all, I'm sure, very smart and have good ideas and maybe recognize a big problem, you know, a social and racial justice problem from a macro scale. You know, it's a whole, you know, it's sort of a whole other thing when we actually have experts in the field who are sort of putting the particulars to paper, which is what we're going to get out of this rulemaking process. So I think that's going to we're going to have more information on that, I think, once we actually get these specific regulations in place. And so that's one of the reasons that I do encourage, you know, a lot of the folks on here administer housing. And the one thing that's sort of, yeah, a lot of the folks on here, you know, are administering housing, and, you know, there's still time to get comments in. So if you guys have concerns and thoughts or ideas about how this should affect tenant application procedures and selection procedures, you know, now's the time to sort of get those comments in, and you know, if there's some glaring problem with how this could be implemented, obviously best to get it out there now rather than after the regulations are adopted.
For sure, it's an important time to make your concerns and suggestions known. On the topic of the Housing Resource Center, Dorothy Hicks had a question about the looking for a clarification on the requirements. Is it limited to new developments, or does it also apply to resales and re-rentals?
So the Act has basically three separate sections: one for new developments, one for re-rentals, and then kind of one for expanding applicant pools on existing developments. They all kind of require the same thing, which is, I think the idea is to just really make sure that we're implementing as much fairness as possible into how this works, which is that you get it up on the website and in the phone system 60 days before, basically 60 days before you really do anything. So if you're going to have a lottery, it's got to be 60 days before the lottery. And, you know, you have to do at least, I think it's either 60, it was in the slide. I think it was 60 days before a lottery or within 1 day of whenever you start your marketing. So we don't want to have a situation where, you know, folks, you know, you're doing other marketing for, you know, 3 months beforehand, and then you finally put it on the website. So I think that answers the question. Let me know. I can carry on.
That's super helpful. I think that does. Dorothy, if you have a follow-up question, be sure to throw it in the Q&A box. And that goes the same for everyone else. This is sort of your, we're coming up on your last call on any questions for Josh. This is a rare opportunity to be able to fire questions. And I appreciate Josh being in the hot seat and taking all these questions on the fly. But yeah, if there are no others, Josh's presentation will certainly be circulated back through your registration. So look for an email from Lindsay Britt in the next day or so with that. And I believe we're also going to be posting this webinar on as a resource available on the website as well, if I'm not mistaken. So there'll be a link for that as well in that coming email. And with that, I think, Josh, I want to thank you again for taking the time and putting the slides together for us. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Did you see Anthony's question?
Sorry.
He had a question about inclusionary projects.
I did not see that. Is it in the chat or in
It is in the Q&A. Sorry.
It's funny. It's not showing up. Oh, I do see it now. Okay. So I will, let me read it. It says, I have concern about the concept of inclusionary projects. I've seen towns reference projects as inclusionary, but do not provide for any upzoning or financial support. DCA limits financing to inclusionary projects. Is there an accurate common definition of inclusionary projects? Does Fair Share Center have one?
I'm not a common definition for inclusionary to me, I think just means that you have a situation where the there's market rate and affordable units, and the market rate units are able to subsidize the production of the affordable housing. Obviously, sort of a core piece of that for developers is creating, is providing a, what's called a compensatory benefit, which it sounds like is what Tony is getting at, which is, perhaps there are some places where there hasn't been a sufficient compensatory benefit. If that's the case, then we need to have a talk about that. I think it's certainly, it is probably different on different sites and in different towns. In some, on a site that needs redevelopment or maybe remediation or some other kind of intensive treatment, higher density might be, and a significant more density or more funds from the town or from DCA could be required to actually make the project realistic. Whereas, a green, greenlands that's, with no steep slopes and no wetlands or anything, it's just sort of a prime piece of property that's available for development may not need all of that and could maybe be realistic with a lower density. Tough question. I think it's hard to answer that with a big sweeping brush, especially when we're all sort of relying on the last time COA did regulations on this kind of thing was 1993, and at that time they were saying that 6 units to the acre was, if you got a developer 6 units to the acre and you required a 20% set aside, that was sufficient. And I think, fast forward 30 years and, we're seeing densities. I mean, we're seeing single family homes developed at 6 units an acre or, 5 or 6 units an acre. So I think we're sort of in a world where densities are a little bit more advanced than that. But I do think it depends on the site. And I encourage Tony to reach out and we can talk about that if he has. It sounds like you might have a particular site in mind, so we can chat about that.
Great, thank you. Steve Weinberg had a question that I think is an excellent idea. In our follow-up email after the session today, we'll include a link to the regulations from the Fair Choice Housing Act, and if we can, an easy way for you to a link to be able to submit comments. Great suggestion, Steve. Before I turn it over to Ed, and thank you again, Josh. This has been really fantastic. It's not often that you get a chance to fire questions on any topic to an expert like yourself. So thank you very much. Before I turn it over to Ed, I wanted to highlight something that Gail mentioned earlier. We have a session coming up on November 4th. The program committee's put together a session. It's called A Crisis Within a Crisis Revisited. It's not the most descriptive topic, but it is intended to revisit the session that we did last December on the rental crisis and basically the home instability that COVID-19 has sort of brought with it. So look for an email about that. You should have gotten it over the last week or so from Lindsay Britt, and there should be a link to sign up for it. It's always a little confusing when sessions overlap and you might have thought, oh, that's just advertising the session that I'm already going to be a part of. So please keep an eye out for that. It's a very reduced fee in order to encourage the most number of people possible and get the word out on some news. We've got a great set of panelists to talk about that subject. So I'm going to turn it over to Ed for closing remarks.
Mark, did you throw it back to me? Thank you. All right, well, that concludes our annual meeting. I'd also like to thank Josh for taking the time to get us up to speed on the issues that he discussed, and of course for Mark to lead that conversation. And all 75 of you attendees, we've had a good turnout for a virtual meeting. We have a good turnout for any meeting, and we appreciate very much your attendance. I'd also like to thank Lindsay Britt, our administrative supports person. Lindsay does a great job in helping get us organized and running the website. and also posting on a regular basis on our website other programs of interest to all of you in the world of affordable housing. So Lindsay does a great job, and I'd like to thank you, Lindsay, for all your technical and other assistance today to make this work. That being said, again, as Mark said, please check us out next week for our program on the 4th. That's going to be interesting. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for joining us and have a nice day. Bye-bye.